Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to follow a trail of gold that starts in the war-torn mines of Sudan and, well, it ends in the glittering skyscrapers of the global market. It's a really complex story about how a precious metal is allegedly fueling one of the world's most devastating conflicts. So let's just start by painting a picture of two very different worlds. On one side, you've got the shimmering towers and bustling gold markets of Dubai. I mean, it's a massive global hub for precious metals. And on the other, you have the heart-wrenching reality of Sudan, a country facing a truly catastrophic humanitarian crisis. So, what's the thread that ties these two places together? Well, according to our sources, the answer is gold. But this isn't just a simple story about trade. It's about a complex pipeline of money and power that, allegedly, directly fuels the violence on the ground. So let's dive in and trace that pipeline.
All right, to really get this, we first need to look at the war itself, and more importantly, what's funding it. Because this is a conflict where the battles aren't just fought with bullets, but with bullion.
Okay, so a huge player in this conflict is the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. Now, they're fighting the official Sudanese armed forces for control of the country. According to reports, the RSF, which actually grew out of the Janjaweed militias in Darfur, controls this vast commercial empire. And what's at the very heart of that empire? You guessed it, gold. You see, for the factions in this conflict, especially the RSF, gold isn't just some precious metal, it's basically a strategic weapon. By controlling Sudan's super lucrative artisanal gold mines, they've turned a natural resource into the financial engine for their war. It's what allows them to buy weapons, pay their fighters, and just keep the whole military campaign going. And the sheer scale of this trade is, well, it's just staggering. Investigative sources estimate that something like 90% of Sudan's gold production, worth an estimated $13.4 billion a year, is smuggled right out of the country. And the vast majority of it, it's reported to end up in one main destination. So how in the world does gold from a mine in Darfur end up on the global market with the profits allegedly bankrolling a war? Well, investigative reports describe what they call a well-oiled machine that turns this natural resource into military might. Sources basically lay out a four-step cycle. First, the RSF gets the gold from mines it controls. Second, that raw gold is smuggled out of Sudan, completely bypassing any official channels. Third, it allegedly lands in the UAE, where it's laundered through a whole network of front companies, melted down, refined, and sold. Finally, those profits are reportedly used to buy weapons and supplies, which completes the cycle and just keeps fueling the conflict back in Sudan. And you know, investigative bodies like the Sentry and even sanctions lists from the US Treasury have put names to these operations. Companies like Al Junaid in Sudan and UAE-based firms like Tradive and Capital Tap Holding, you can see them here, are repeatedly pointed to as being the key cogs in this whole paramilitary industrial complex. And just take a look at this. This diagram from the Sentry really maps out the whole corporate ecosystem that investigators allege is supporting the RSF from Dubai. It's like a spider's web, right? It shows how all these different companies are interconnected, often with the same people acting as fronts for multiple businesses, creating all these layers to hide who really owns what. Okay, so as you can imagine, this massive flow of Sudanese gold hasn't exactly gone unnoticed. It's prompted a ton of international scrutiny, which has led to a series of pretty strong denials, but also some significant regulatory reforms from the UAE. The UAE, for its part, has been very clear and public about its position. It has repeatedly denied supplying weapons to anyone involved in the conflict. The official stance is that they are a neutral party, and they're consistently calling for a ceasefire and a diplomatic solution. And in response to that international pressure, especially from groups like the Financial Action Task Force, the UAE did implement some major reforms. You can see a clear progression on this timeline. They were put on a gray list because of weak financial oversight. Then, boom, they rolled out strict new laws for gold sourcing. They cracked down on refineries that weren't playing by the rules. And ultimately, they were taken off that gray list in early 2024. But here's what's really interesting. Despite the conflict and all the new rules, the official trade data shows the UAE is still the main destination for Sudan's declared gold exports. Now, the numbers have dropped since the war started, for sure, but the official flow is still there, highlighting just how deep the economic ties are between these two countries. So, this brings up a much bigger question, right? Is this all just about the money? Well, our sources suggest this goes way beyond gold. We're talking about geopolitics, regional influence, and long-term economic strategy. And you really can't overstate how massive the economics are here. Gold is a huge pillar of the UAE's vision for a post-oil economy. To put it in perspective, back in 2022, gold imported just from Africa accounted for nearly 7% of the UAE's entire GDP. That shows you just how central the gold trade is to their whole economic game plan.
So, when you ask why the UAE is so engaged here, sources suggest it's a really complex mix of goals. It's things like countering the influence of political Islam, securing access to the super important Red Sea trade route, and protecting billions of dollars they've already invested in farms and ports, all while building up their own position as a global financial hub. And here is maybe the most crucial point of all. This whole economic relationship creates a deep dependency. Reports indicate that both of the warring factions in Sudan, the SAF and the RSF, actually rely on UAE banks and markets to do business internationally. This financial leverage, well, it gives the UAE a pretty significant and unique influence over everyone involved in the conflict.
And that leaves us with this final, really challenging question that sits at the very heart of this issue. Where does a country's economic policy end? And where does its moral responsibility begin? It's the incredibly complex tightrope that global hubs have to walk, balancing their own economic interests against getting tangled up in these distant, devastating conflicts.